After age 60, your body enters a different physiological chapter. What used to be resilient, adaptive, and forgiving becomes more fragile, more reactive, especially your cardiovascular system. And the most dangerous part? The decline is often silent. You may feel fine. You may even feel normal. But inside, your heart is working harder than ever to keep you steady. The elasticity of your arteries is reduced, endothelial function begins to weaken, and the natural balance of hormones that regulate blood pressure and inflammation begins to shift. That means your margin for error, nutritionally, physically, and emotionally, is much smaller than it used to be. This is where most people get caught off guard. We often think of heart attacks and strokes as sudden dramatic events, but in truth, they are the end result of small, cumulative stresses. These stresses build up from everyday choices: the food we eat, how we sleep, whether we move, how we manage stress, and yes, whether we take medications consistently. After 60, every one of these choices matters more. What you could get away with at 40 now leaves a measurable footprint on your vascular health. Let's take blood flow, for example. As we age, arteries naturally stiffen. This is called arteriosclerosis. It's a gradual process, but it becomes dangerous when compounded by high sodium intake, lack of movement, and poor sleep. Blood pressure rises because the vessels are less able to expand and absorb the force of each heartbeat. This increases the workload on the heart, potentially leading to left ventricular hypertrophy, a thickening of the heart muscle that makes pumping less efficient. Now combine that with subtle inflammation, driven by processed foods, alcohol, and emotional stress, and you're adding fuel to the fire. Chronic low-grade inflammation has been directly linked to atherosclerosis, the narrowing of arteries through plaque buildup. But here's the good news. While the aging process itself is non-negotiable, how quickly or how severely your heart declines is largely within your control. The key lies in recognizing that after 60, what you do daily matters more than what you do occasionally. This is not about fear, it's about awareness. Because at this stage of life, the most harmful habits are rarely loud or obvious. They're subtle, they're quiet, they're easy to overlook. Which is why this video exists, not to scare you, but to highlight the most common overlooked habits that slowly wear down the heart without warning, and more importantly, to show you how each one can be corrected. In the sections ahead, we'll explore how small actions, like cutting back on sodium or adjusting your sleep routine, can dramatically improve cardiovascular health. Your heart has carried you through life for decades. It's time to carry it wisely through the next ones. Before we dive into the next section, if you're finding this valuable, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let us know which heart health habit surprised you the most. Your support helps us reach more people who need this life-saving information. Number 1. Poor sleep is breaking your heart. As we discussed earlier, after 60, the margin for error in your daily habits narrows significantly. And one of the most underestimated, yet profoundly influential, aspects of your cardiovascular health is the quality of your sleep. Specifically, your heart depends on uninterrupted, oxygen-rich sleep to recover, stabilize, and maintain rhythm. Here's what many don't realize. During deep sleep, especially in the non-REM phases, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, and your body enters a state of cellular repair. This is when inflammation is dialed down, oxidative stress is managed, and the workload on your heart temporarily eases. But for many seniors, this natural recovery cycle is disrupted. The most common culprit? Obstructive sleep apnea, a condition in which the airway intermittently collapses during sleep, causing repeated drops in oxygen levels. Each episode triggers a physiological alarm response. Cortisol is released, blood pressure spikes, and the heart rate surges. This fight-or-flight pattern can occur dozens, even hundreds of times each night. without the person ever fully waking up. Over time, this leads to increased risk of hypertension, atrial fibrillation, heart failure, and even sudden cardiac death. And it's not just full-blown apnea that causes harm. Even milder forms of disrupted breathing, snoring, or shallow oxygen saturation can create a hostile environment for the heart. As oxygen drops, the heart compensates by pumping harder and faster, which accelerates wear on the vascular system. Unfortunately, many seniors dismiss fatigue, morning headaches, or difficulty concentrating as normal aging, when in fact these are classic signs of impaired sleep quality and nighttime hypoxia. The science is clear. Maintaining stable oxygen levels during sleep is essential for cardiovascular protection. That's why screening for sleep disorders, particularly in those with high blood pressure, obesity, or irregular heart rhythms, is critical after age 60. Treatments like CPAP, positional therapy, or even simple breathing retraining can make a dramatic difference, not just in sleep quality, but in daytime blood pressure, energy levels, and heart rhythm stability. In short, your heart's ability to function during the day is deeply connected to how well you breathe at night. Neglecting sleep is not just about being tired. It's about leaving your heart unprotected during its most vulnerable hours. Number 2, salt is silently raising your blood pressure. By now, we've established a key principle. After 60, your heart is more reactive to small imbalances. And one of the most consistent and preventable sources of cardiovascular strain is sodium. Not the salt you see, the salt you don't. Let's be clear, sodium is essential to life. It helps regulate fluid balance, nerve transmission, and muscle function. But in excess, and especially in the context of aging arteries, it becomes harmful. Here's what happens inside the body. When sodium intake rises, your body retains water to dilute the excess concentration. That increases blood volume. More blood volume means higher pressure on the arterial walls. In younger adults, blood vessels can stretch and absorb this added pressure. But after 60, arteries have lost much of their elasticity due to a natural process called arteriosclerosis. This means the heart must generate greater force to circulate blood through narrower, stiffer vessels. This chronic workload accelerates left ventricular hypertrophy, a thickening of the heart muscle that reduces its efficiency and increases the risk of heart failure and arrhythmia. But that's just one layer. Excess sodium also disrupts kidney function, impairing their ability to filter blood and regulate electrolyte balance. The kidneys begin to retain even more sodium and water, further raising blood pressure in a vicious cycle. Meanwhile, small blood vessels throughout the brain, eyes, and heart suffer micro damage from this constant high-pressure environment, increasing the risk of stroke, vision loss, and ischemic heart disease. Now here's the overlooked reality. Most dietary sodium doesn't come from your salt shaker. It comes from processed and packaged foods, even those that don't taste salty. Bread, canned vegetables, salad dressings, cereals, soups, deli meats, and low-fat frozen meals are all common offenders. A single serving can contain 30 to 50% of your daily sodium limit without you realizing it. Health guidelines recommend adults over 60 limit sodium to no more than 1,500 milliliters per day. Yet many exceed 3,000 milliliters daily, simply by following routine eating habits. That's why awareness is key. Reducing sodium isn't about eliminating flavor. It's about reducing risk. Substituting salt with herbs, lemon, vinegar, or garlic doesn't just improve taste. It improves vascular function. Every milligram matters when arteries are aging. By choosing to reduce hidden salt, you're giving your heart the conditions it needs to beat with less resistance, less force, and less long-term damage. 3. Your breakfast could trigger a heart attack. At first glance, breakfast seems harmless, even beneficial. It's often described as the most important meal of the day. But for older adults, what you eat at breakfast may carry more cardiovascular risk than any other meal of the day. Here's why. In the early morning, the body is naturally in a state of physiological transition. Cortisol levels are elevated, blood pressure begins to rise, and blood viscosity, thickness, is at its peak. This is a natural part of the circadian rhythm. However, for individuals over 60, whose arteries are stiffer, endothelium less responsive, and heart less adaptable, this period becomes a vulnerable window. When that early morning biological state is met with a high-fat, high-sodium, high-sugar breakfast, the cardiovascular stress multiplies. Let's look at the mechanisms. Saturated fats, often found in processed breakfast meats like bacon or sausage, butter, fried eggs, and pastries, raise LDL cholesterol levels and promote endothelial dysfunction, impairing the inner lining of blood vessels. Simultaneously, sodium raises blood pressure, while refined carbohydrates and sugars spike blood glucose levels, triggering an inflammatory response and insulin surge. This combination promotes increased platelet aggregation, meaning your blood is more likely to clot. And when this happens during the early morning rise in blood pressure and blood viscosity, it becomes the perfect setup for myocardial infarction, what we commonly know as a heart attack. Statistically, this is not just theory. Research shows that the majority of heart attacks occur in the morning, often within a few hours after waking. And while many focus on emotional stress as a trigger, metabolic stress from poor food choices is just as significant. For seniors, breakfast isn't just about energy, it's about vascular stability. So what's the takeaway? Avoiding heavy, greasy, and salty morning meals isn't about dietary restriction. It's about physiological alignment. The goal is to reduce vascular strain, not increase it, at the most sensitive point of your daily rhythm. A breakfast rich in fiber, moderate in protein, low in sodium and added sugars, and free of trans fats allows your cardiovascular system to stabilize rather than spike. After 60, breakfast is no longer just about filling your stomach. It's about setting the tone for your heart, for the next hour, and for the rest of your life. Number 4. Alcohol and aging don't mix. In younger adults, the cardiovascular system can often buffer the effects of occasional alcohol consumption. But once you reach 60 and beyond, the body's tolerance, especially your heart's, begins to decline significantly. There's a critical shift that happens with age. Alcohol metabolism slows, blood vessels stiffen, and cardiac rhythm becomes more vulnerable. What once seemed like moderate drinking may now exert a disproportionate physiological burden on an aging cardiovascular system. Let's break this down. Alcohol, or ethanol, is a direct cardiac toxin in large amounts, but even low doses can pose problems for older adults due to changes in metabolism and organ sensitivity. The liver, which processes over 90% of alcohol, becomes less efficient with age, allowing alcohol to remain in the bloodstream longer. This leads to prolonged vasodilation, blood pressure instability, and impaired autonomic control of heart rate. Even more concerning is alcohol's effect on cardiac rhythm regulation. Seniors are significantly more susceptible to atrial fibrillation, a dangerous, irregular heartbeat linked to stroke, heart failure, and sudden cardiac death. Studies have shown that alcohol can increase the likelihood of arrhythmias even in those who drink modestly but consistently. In addition, alcohol disrupts sleep architecture by suppressing REM sleep and causing frequent nighttime awakenings. This increases nighttime blood pressure, contributes to sympathetic nervous system activation, and limits the heart's natural repair cycle, a process we discussed in earlier sections. Alcohol also interferes with cardiovascular medications commonly prescribed to seniors, including antihypertensives, anticoagulants, and cholesterol-lowering drugs. These interactions can reduce drug effectiveness or amplify side effects, particularly hypotension, dizziness, and bleeding risk. Another hidden factor is dehydration. Alcohol is a diuretic, promoting fluid loss that can reduce plasma volume and increase blood viscosity, both of which place additional strain on the heart and increase clotting risk, especially when combined with high blood pressure or sedentary behavior. From a clinical perspective, the safest level of alcohol consumption for older adults, particularly those with any cardiovascular risk, is either none or rare, limited intake. The long-standing belief that red wine protects the heart has been increasingly challenged by newer data, showing that any potential benefit from polyphenols is outweighed by alcohol's negative cardiovascular effects in seniors. In short, alcohol is not heart medicine, especially not after 60. It's a chemical stressor in a body that's already managing reduced resilience. Your heart deserves clean signals, not conflicting ones. 5. Skipping your BP meds can kill you silently. Among all the cardiovascular risk factors facing older adults, uncontrolled hypertension remains the most pervasive and most underestimated. In part because it often produces no symptoms until it's too late. But what makes the problem worse is not just the condition itself. It's the growing habit of inconsistent medication use. Let's be clear. High blood pressure is not a temporary spike. It's a chronic condition rooted in structural and hormonal changes within the vascular system. Once blood pressure rises and remains elevated, the heart is forced to pump against greater resistance. This leads to left ventricular hypertrophy, reduced cardiac output efficiency, and increased oxygen demand, all of which accelerate heart fatigue. In individuals over 60, the vascular system is already compromised by age-related arterial stiffening, impaired baroreceptor sensitivity, and reduced renal clearance of sodium and fluid. This makes precise blood pressure control even more critical and less forgiving of fluctuation. When medication is skipped, even for a few days, the body responds unpredictably. Blood pressure may surge suddenly due to rebound hypertension, a phenomenon in which the body's internal regulation overcorrects in the absence of the medication. These spikes significantly raise the risk of stroke, myocardial infarction, and aortic dissection, especially in individuals with pre-existing vascular disease. Furthermore, inconsistent dosing leads to unstable plasma drug levels, reducing the medication's therapeutic effect and increasing side effect sensitivity. This instability undermines the very goal of antihypertensive therapy: long-term, steady pressure reduction to prevent end organ damage in the brain, heart, kidneys, and eyes. Some patients may feel well and interpret that as a sign they no longer need their medication. But this is a dangerous misconception. The absence of symptoms does not mean the absence of damage. In fact, the most serious complications of hypertension, including stroke and heart failure, typically occur without warning, following prolonged silent injury to blood vessels. The cornerstone of effective hypertension management is consistency. That means taking medication at the same time each day, monitoring blood pressure regularly, and never altering your regimen without medical guidance. Support tools such as pill organizers, smartphone reminders, or pharmacy auto refills are not just conveniences, they're protective strategies. At this stage of life, one missed pill isn't just a lapse, it's a biological shock to a system that depends on stability. Protect your brain, protect your kidneys, most of all, protect your heart, by respecting the power of the medications prescribed to preserve it. After age 60, every system in the body becomes more sensitive to imbalance, but none more so than the heart. By now you've seen how seemingly small choices, disrupted sleep, excess sodium, alcohol use, heavy breakfasts, missed medications, can compound into serious cardiovascular strain, not overnight, but gradually, silently, and often without symptoms, until a sudden event exposes the hidden damage. But here's what science also shows us: recovery is possible, and it doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency, consistent movement, consistent sleep, consistent medication adherence, consistent nutrition choices, These are not short-term fixes. They are daily signals to your cardiovascular system that you are choosing to support it, not stress it. And while you can't undo decades in a single week, the body, even an aging one, responds remarkably well to change. Blood pressure can stabilize. Inflammation can decrease. Endothelial function can improve. The heart can regain efficiency when its environment becomes less hostile. The key is awareness followed by action, even small action. You don't need to overhaul your life. You just need to start with one change, sustain it, then build from there. Your heart has been beating for you every second since before you were born. It's carried you through every stage of life. Now it's your turn to carry it, with knowledge, intention, and care. If you found this information helpful and want to keep your heart and your health strong as you age, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, Healthy Daily. We break down the science, simplify the advice, and bring you the latest on how to live better after 60. Your health journey doesn't end here. It starts with knowledge. Join us at Healthy Daily, and let's keep building a stronger, smarter future, one heartbeat at a time.